Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and today on Patriot Radio, Israel strikes Hamas leaders inside Qatar. Also, the Czech and Romanian intelligence services bust a spy ring in Eastern Europe, and it does look like there is an ongoing gray zone warfare as Berlin's power goes out and anarchists claim credit. Could that be something that happens in the United States in the future? And also here on the home front, we have this horrible situation where repeat offenders are being let out onto the streets and death and carnage are the results. Trump cracking down. And lastly, in Nepal, revolution as the parliament burns, as Gen Z has had enough, at least in that country, but maybe it's spreading to others. And our guest today, Clare Lopez, who's going to be talking about the strikes by Israel against Hamas and what that may mean for the Middle East here in the near future. Here at Patriot Radio, we want you to be informed with the latest information and the best information so that you and your family can be prepared for the times that are ahead and the times that are already upon us. But no fear, we were made for this. Follow us at patriotradio.us/Telegram for breaking news and real-time intelligence analysis. Also during this time, we are praying for everyone in positions of power and everyone that is maybe having a little bit of fear. We would love to pray with you and for you. patriotradio.us/prayer. And just an invite, any of you that happen to make it to Spokane, Washington, please join us here at On Fire Ministries. Our services are here on Sunday at 10 a.m. And with everything that is happening right now, I felt appropriate this word today from Psalm 29, verse 7. The operation to strike Hamas in Qatar was called Summit of Fire. And this is what Psalm 29:7 says. The voice of the Lord divides flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. Then a little bit farther down, the voice of the Lord makes the deer give birth and strips the forest bare. And in his temple, everything says glory. The Lord sat as the king at the flood. Yes, the Lord sits as king forever. The Lord will give strength to his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. And we do pray for that peace of Jerusalem today. That brings us now to your daily intelligence briefing, coming to us from the globalist front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
Oh, nothing, the great Islamic financial convergence. This is a larger series that is being put out on Technocracy News, but here is why it's important. Global banks are adopting Islamic banking practices. This began really in earnest back in 2007, and now it's happening that titans like JP Morgan, Chase, Citigroup, HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, they're continuing this at a fever pace with projections reaching $7.5 trillion in assets heading into this. You see, the left and the Marxists and the jihadis always work together, and they have been working together seamlessly at the ground level for a very, very long time. It's about time we recognize that. It's about time that we take some action against those who refuse to agree with the Constitution of the United States, but in fact have a whole intent and purpose of subverting and undermining it. Also on the globalist front, your tax dollars are helping to build Palantir's global surveillance empire. There is more to this than just they're watching everything that we're doing. They're also tracking everything that we're doing, which brings us to the next article. And that is that it is finally really admitted that these license plate readers and Flock Safety, which was funded by Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, and Founders Fund, Peter Thiel, among others, invented a scalable device that can be mounted anywhere, and all it needs is solar power, and it's constantly reading license plates, but it's also recording the make and model of your car and the color. In other words, it's fingerprinting your car and where you travel. Very interesting that I brought this up a long time ago in the legislature, that roundabouts happen to be on key exit points and entry points to cities, not necessarily in the intersections that need them the most, but all the way around the city. And you can actually see this for those of you that live in the Northwest around Spokane, for example. But also what has happened is license plate readers have been installed in those various locations. So all of this tracking that is happening, is that being sold? And I think that that is the question that should be asked of all of our local and state governments. And what is the protections for the citizens? Because this doesn't really seem to be about safety. It seems to be about control. And that brings us now to the China front. President Donald Trump's recent remarks targeting China and its allies marks a notable shift in tone after months of avoiding direct criticism of China, and particularly China's leader, Xi Jinping. Trump is not holding back anymore. On September 5th, Trump took aim at India and Russia in a Truth Social post. It said, quote, "Looks like we've lost India and Russia to deepest, darkest China," Trump said. "May they have a long and prosperous future together." Obviously saying that tongue-in-cheek. His Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, came out and said that they were going to pursue collapsing the Russian economy. And it does look like the Chinese economy is going to be headed down even further than it is. We're going to get to that here in a second. But Trump then shifts his defense policy away from China to the Western Hemisphere. Are things worse in China than we understand? And is China no longer a threat as such? In other words, are they having so much internal turmoil in their leadership, so much economic turmoil, that they cannot wage war against Taiwan? Very interesting. They know something that we don't. Trump disappeared for a week, and all of a sudden these plans come out. Israel strikes Qatar as well. I think there is a shift happening, a geostrategic shift happening. Trump is orchestrating this. He's trying to maintain ambiguity in the middle of it, but this is very calculated. And the next 2 months here in the United States, the next 2 months in the world, things are going to change dramatically as the order that we are all used to and has been in place for the last 80 years is going to shift away from what the globalists want, which is why we're going to see more unrest. But also we're going to see some victories. Australia's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is going to travel to Vanuatu, and it looks like they may be close to a $500 million deal. Why is that important? Because China has been trying to infiltrate those Pacific Island chains, and it looks like there is a lot more diplomatic pushback happening now to isolate China in those Pacific Islands that may be successful. Also, China's debt could total 400% of its GDP. The real estate sector in China remains a debt bubble fueled with roughly $695 billion in new government-approved loans. While the property crisis has been widely reported, China's debt problems are less understood. Official figures show that the public and private debt combined already exceed 309% of GDP, and this probably is an underestimate of the true scope, which means that in a few short years, China's total debt burden will climb to at least 400% of GDP. Let me simplify this quickly. China's economy cannot be sustained at that level and is headed toward a downturn or potentially a collapse, depending on how you define collapse. The tariffs and the current tariff war are also playing into this, although much less talked about at this time. So, again, the next 2 months are going to be very determinative as we're now in the September-October timeframe, which is a window of time that China could invade Taiwan. Although, based on the current rhetoric and the motions of the United States, doesn't look like Trump thinks they're going to do that. But as always, though, it could be a bluff. China's regime can't help itself, according to Gordon Chang, and this is based on an article from the Chinese themselves. They are advocating that Japan's new prime minister be the anti-China extremist so that they can get a great opportunity for China to settle their score with Japan. An overt statement that they want to go to war. Now, again, this can be just Chinese blustering, or it could be a signal. Either way, what happens to Japan over the next 2 months is going to be very determinative of U.S. policy in the South China Sea, southern Philippines too, and Australia. All of this stuff is going to rapidly change here in the next couple of months. So please join us in keeping our eyes on this. And we're going to see, again, more unrest, and it's going to be probably fomented, not just organic. And I'm going to get to why here in a second. We're going to shift to Nepal, right on the doorstep of China. A recent social media ban in Nepal sparked mass demonstrations. They banned Facebook, X, and YouTube. Underneath that, though, there has been a rumbling against the corruption, authoritarian governance, and worsening economic crisis there. Young protesters calling themselves Nepal's Generation Z said they are not only rejecting restrictions on free speech, but also a decade of political failure since the country transitioned from a monarchy to a republic. And not really necessarily a good republic, but a communist republic, if those two things can even really go together. And here was the result. Politicians, as they banned social media, also fired on protesters. The protesters, in turn, stormed the parliament in Nepal. You could see it on fire there. They stormed also the Communist Party headquarters and tore down the hammer and sickle flag. You can see that in the next set of videos and pictures here. Then, when they stormed Parliament, and this is probably one of the most iconic buildings in all of Nepal, they set the Parliament on fire. If we could shift to that. This setting of the Parliament on fire resulted in the destruction of this Lion's Palace in Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. Looks like it has almost been completely destroyed. The Nepalese army earlier tonight said they would be assuming responsibility for law and order, and so they are declaring martial law. Also, there is a report that the wife of the former prime minister of Nepal has reportedly been killed after their home was set on fire by a mob. So, as these violent protests continue, there will be more things coming out, but I want to just highlight some intelligence analysis here. After they opened fire on crowds, it looks like they killed about 19 people. And a few minutes after the shooting, after they stormed the palace, the current prime minister KP Sharma Oli resigned and was able to escape Kathmandu via helicopter along with other leaders. Most of the government now in Nepal has resigned, and many cabinet ministers remain unaccounted for. Flights out of Kathmandu airport have been halted due to the unrest, so flights out of the country will be unavailable for some time. Some great analysis by S2 Underground here. And the point is that this is just developing. I'm going to also add this, some quick analysis. It looks like this is not organic, and I'm going to tell you why. I think it's called Humming Nepal. There's a new NGO. They hadn't even got their website finished that was really behind all of this. In other words, there's no history for this NGO. That is typically how these types of things are funded, and the overthrow of countries is funded. And so what is being learned now is old NGOs are not going to be used to do this stuff. New NGOs are going to suddenly come on the scene, and they're going to be used to foment these types of revolutions in countries like Nepal. So is this the United States behind this? Is this a CIA playbook? I don't know. But it does not look organic because this main NGO that just suddenly formed is a big player behind this. So when we come back from the break, we're going to get to Israel's strike on Qatar and what that means for the Middle East, and also Trump's crackdown on crime here back at home.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with the Middle East front. Amid Ethiopia's continued construction of the Grand Renaissance Dam and Cairo's concerns over its share of Nile waters, Egypt's Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation stated that Egypt is among the most water-scarce countries in the world, setting the stage for a clear flashpoint between Ethiopia and Egypt. Interestingly enough, a multinational force of paratroopers consisting of troops from the United States, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, and at least 37 other countries, participated in Bright Star 25. The scenario there simulated terrorist attacks, but the fact is the United States is still working with the Egyptian military. And that brings us now to the strikes on Qatar. 10 Israeli Air Force jets launched strikes on Hamas officials, firing 11 precision munitions. This was supposed to be a meeting where they were discussing Trump's plan for peace. Now, there are massive conflicting reports of who was killed there. I'm going to get to Hamas's official statement in a second, and whether or not the United States actually let Qatar know ahead of time. There's a bunch of nonsense out there on social media that somehow the United States may have just learned this morning. I highly doubt that that is the case. The United States most certainly knew that this was going to happen and very likely gave its approval. They may not have known the exact timing of it, but that's really irrelevant. The United States has assured Qatar that there would be no more attacks like this on its soil. And according to a joint statement issued by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz, today's strike against Hamas leadership in the Qatari capital of Doha was a response to yesterday's terrorist attack in Jerusalem. Clearly, they said that the Hamas leadership was the one who initiated and organized the October 7th massacre and has not stopped launching murderous actions against the state of Israel and its citizens since then, including taking responsibility for the murder of their citizens in yesterday's attack in Jerusalem. Hamas did claim responsibility yesterday. Israel is not messing around. The U.S. Embassy in Doha has issued an official directive instructing all American citizens to shelter in place until further notice. And Hamas released its first official statement since today's strike, stating that all members of the delegation survived the attack, while the director, Jihad, nice first name, by the way, Labad, director of Dr. Khalil al-Hayya's office, and Hammam al-Haya, son of Dr. Khalil al-Haya, and Abdullah Wahid, and Momin Husana, and Abdullah al-Mamluk were killed alongside a Qatari security officer. I want to highlight that very last part. Qatar came out and said this. The interior minister said that the strike did, in fact, kill a member of their internal security forces. Why was he there with Hamas? Now, obviously, Qatar has been involved in funding the Muslim Brotherhood for years. There's no doubt about that, no question about that. And we're not going to sugarcoat it like some other folks that are nationally known. But we will question some things here. Is this a tacit admission that Qatar has been cozied up to Hamas all along? It looks like that's the case. It'll be interesting to see how that is responded to by the United States and Qatar in the days ahead. Netanyahu, following today's strike in Doha, Qatar, also said, quote, "The days terrorist leaders were immune anywhere are over," end quote. Now, it needs to be said that there are also Hamas leaders in Turkey. And that's a NATO ally. That's a whole different ballgame if Israel struck there. Netanyahu also asked Hamas to now accept the ceasefire, which can lead to an end of the war. This is after Hamas rejected Trump's plan, at least initially, because they didn't want to release all the hostages at once. Senior defense official told reporters that today's Israeli strike on Hamas leadership in Qatar could pave the way for ending the war in Gaza. Quote, "The elimination of Hamas leaders in Qatar was a decisive and well-executed operation by the IDF and Shin Bet, carried out under the directives of the Prime Minister and Defense Minister." And he explained that Summit of Fire marked a major step toward defeating Hamas and delivering justice for October 7th and reinforcing Israel's deterrence and potentially creating the conditions to end the war on Israel's terms. I would agree with that. But I do not think, I think Hamas is on a suicide mission right now. That doesn't really, and it shouldn't really surprise anyone. But it will set the tone for the end of this. Also, in response back here at home, the NYPD deployed additional resources to religious, cultural, and diplomatic sites across New York City out of an abundance of caution in response to the unfolding situation in Qatar. This is a tacit admission that there are jihadi terrorist elements on the ground in the United States operating in New York City. This isn't just an abundance of caution. That's why I said the next 2 months, the world is going to change. And they may just, in fact, try a terrorist attack again on U.S. soil. They being, well, the Muslim Brotherhood and all of its proxies. That's why they need to be banned post-haste. That brings us now to the Russia front. Tens of thousands of homes and businesses in the German capital of Berlin were left without electricity after 2 transmission pylons were found ablaze around 3 a.m., clearly looking like sabotage. Berlin police are also examining a claim that an unnamed anarchist group carried out the arson attack. And it looks like there may have been a couple of these groups. Are they under the instructions of Russia or some other nation state? Is this a precursor to what could happen in the United States of America? And they're testing it out there in Europe first, because remember, this is the third incident where power has gone out on a massive scale in Europe in just the last year. Make sure you have food, water, and supplies stocked up in case the power does go down for an extended period of time. Also, Poland's security services have arrested a Belarusian agent and will expel a Belarusian diplomat accused of aiding espionage, according to PM Donald Tusk. The operation, coordinated with Romania and the Czech Republic and Moldova, led to charges of spying in Poland and in Hungary. So very interesting. One of the at least identified perpetrators was a former Moldovan security and intelligence service official who BIS alleges was pushing classified information to Belarus's National Intelligence Service. This is also interesting that there's now a crackdown on these enemy agents. Now, I want to put this into some context. And yes, I just said that because they are not friends of the West. I want to put this into some context. Generally speaking, if intelligence services know of the existence of spies, they sometimes will, and generally will, let them continue to operate if they can monitor the communications and maybe feed them disinformation. The fact that they're beginning to take them out tells me that something is in the offing, that they believe that something is about to happen in Europe and that they need to crack down now. So this is a marker, a timing marker that we're going to continue to pay attention to and not just some news blurb. Also, Poland closed its border with Belarus. The ostensible reason was due to war games. But again, this looks like a tightening of Eastern Europe right now because they believe something is about to happen. French patriots flood the streets waving flags and demanding Macron's resignation and France's exit from the European Union. Calls for revolution in France intensify. It looks like Europe is waking up and fighting back. Also, former President Nicolas Sarkozy says that Marine Le Pen will come to power. This is a massive admission and a huge sea change. He said this in Brussels on September 2nd in front of an audience of 600 people. Why is this such a sea change? Because here is a statement from Marine Le Pen. France will take all necessary steps. Radical mosques will be closed. Hate preachers will be expelled. Salafism and the Muslim Brotherhood will be liquidated. This is what France needs, and this would set a precedent and embolden and encourage the rest of Europe to follow along Poland's lead in cleaning up their own borders. And that brings us now to the national front. The U.S. Army has awarded Underhill a contract to develop a night vision and mixed reality system as part of the Soldier-Borne Mission Command program. This is from Underhill's website. Listen to this. This award will equip every U.S. warfighter with superhero-like abilities that redefine what it means to win in the 21st century. The strategy now is not going to be these huge armored pushes. It's going to be small teams of special forces or enhanced capability warfighters that are sent in against specific targets, augmented with AI, robots, and drones. The face of warfare is shifting massively right now, but it's always going to center around boots on the ground. Homeland attackers have a goal to get control of Tier 2 cities in the U.S. that have a Tier 1 trauma center because that's what the entire game is played from the hospital, according to Apex Guard. ISIS has worked out that 10 to 15 cities, these are Tier 2 cities in the U.S., that have a Tier 1 trauma center, the amount of fear, the amount of attack that can be carried out because police forces are limited, SWAT teams are limited, the amount of time it would take to move resources from major cities to back up the local police force gives them enough time to carry out a mass casualty event. Here is what they're saying in simple terms. It's not going to be New York or Los Angeles necessarily, as it would be something like a smaller city. Maybe like Des Moines, Iowa. Maybe a city of only 100,000. Because they believe they can surge resources, the terrorists, to attack, and then when first responders come, attack them again, and that this would cause fear throughout the rest of the United States. So ISIS has worked out this plan, and also Al-Qaeda, even though they don't try to name their organizations that anymore. Be prepared. Times are getting interesting. And one of the most horrible videos that I've seen for a long time, not only is a Ukrainian refugee, Irina Zarutska, killed. But as she is bleeding to death, no one helps her. I want that to burn into your memories right now. That is not America. We need men to stand up and become men again. We need a return of masculinity, of the warrior spirit that protects the place from which life comes. We need to seriously assess who we are as American citizens, who we are as the American people. This should never, ever happen again. And Trump has come out very clearly that he's going to crack down on this kind of crime and these kinds of repeat offenders, because the Marxist and liberal policies are to let them out of jail. In fact, it's actually been a Marxist policy to empty jails for 100 years. And the reason is to create chaos. These kind of things are going to lead to a loss of civility in our society. But America is different in one gigantic respect, and that is that we have a God-given unalienable right to protect ourselves and our families and our neighbors from this type of murderous rampage. Also, a career criminal with 6 violent arrests was released from jail and raped a 4-year-old child and then gave her an STD. And I'm sorry that this is so graphic today, but this is what we're facing right here, and we need to not turn our eyes away. It's up to all of us to hold our local elected officials accountable, bring these things to their attention, demand change, demand enforcement of existing law, and also our state officials as well. The Democrat Party is going to be in the political wilderness for 2 decades if they continue down this line of it's okay for murderers to kill innocent people. And they continue to defend it. They continue to defend this soft on crime approach and policy. But it's our job to call them out. Also, President Trump launched immigration raids in Chicago. That has begun. Tom Homan busted out the receipts and lights up MSNBC during an explosive interview after they accused ICE agents of disappearing people. He brought out the receipts of all the people that were arrested, and many of them, actually all of them that he listed, criminals. The Supreme Court lifted restrictions on immigration stops in Southern California, another win for DHS as they continue to ramp up immigration enforcement across the United States. Also, investigations into anti-Christian ideology behind trans terrorism gaining national traction and national attention. Yes, this trans terrorism is real, and the ideology behind it, extremely anti-Christian. On Tuesday, 15 Michigan Republicans returned to court after more than 2 years of politically motivated prosecution by Attorney General Dana Nessel. These citizens, many of them seniors, faced up to 84 years in prison. Judge Simmons ruled that they are not going to go to jail. And I find it fascinating that these electors, now exonerated, are emboldened even more to stand up for what is right, and that is the true American spirit. Also, Cracker Barrel suspending the redesign of its restaurants after customer backlash. This is what happens when Americans stand up and stand together. Also, gold and silver have hit record highs. At least gold has hit a record high. Silver now over $40. This is going to continue to trend upwards, it looks like. Here is a quick map of who has all the gold. And it does look like that foreign nations are stocking up on gold. And again, this is an indicator that at least foreign governments and our own government think that something is about to happen, and these are one of the hedges, particularly against war. President Trump just had the HUD Secretary Scott Turner on stage, and here's what he said. I want everybody to hear this amazing statement. Think about this. What if 1 million people prayed for our country every single week between now and next July 4th? What if believers all across this great nation got together with 10 people each week to pray for our country and our fellow citizens? Let that sink in. Think about the transformation you and I could witness. Amen? And that's a challenge to everybody listening to Patriot Radio and watching on patriot.tv. Find 10 people and pray for the country between now and next July. And that is the briefing. When we come back from the break, our guest, Clare Lopez.
What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with our guest today, Clare Lopez. She's the founder and president of Lopez Liberty LLC, focusing on national security threats, a former CIA operation officer with expertise in counterterrorism, geopolitics, and intelligence. Clare, thank you for coming on today. A lot happening in the Middle East.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Very glad to be with you again. And you're sure right about that. What a day in the Middle East.
Wow. So first of all, were the strikes by Israel actually effective at taking out the Hamas leadership in a decapitation strike? What do we know right now?
Well, of course, we're still assessing the results of that strike, but it does look like at least a number of the very senior leadership of Hamas who've been in safe haven, living a life of luxury in Doha, Qatar, have been taken out. In particular, Khalil al-Hayya, and a number of others too.
So how does something like this happen? You know, there's all this swirling around social media that somehow the United States didn't know and was alerted this morning. It seems like a bunch of hogwash to me, knowing how these things normally play out. So, to attack Qatar like this, I mean, there had to have been some knowledge, some level of knowledge by the United States, I would think.
Well, to be clear, first of all, this was not an attack against Qatar, but rather against the Hamas leadership there apparently gathered at a meeting in Doha, Qatar, the capital. No, I think there's no way that the United States did not know about this in advance. Certainly as the Israeli Air Force, flew over the big United States Air Force base at Al Udeid, would have known about this. There's no question about that. Whether this was pre-coordinated among Israel, the United States, President Trump, and maybe even Qatar itself remains to be seen. But certainly the United States knew before this morning.
You know, the fact of 3 months, within a 3-month period, Iran has attacked targets on Qatar's soil, and now Israel has attacked targets on Qatar's soil. I don't think we could have written this a year ago. What does this mean for the Abraham Accords going forward in the rest of the Middle East?
Well, certainly taking out the top leadership of Hamas will affect how things go in Gaza. As we know, the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, are converging on Gaza City to eliminate the last remaining alive leadership figures of Hamas in Gaza. The people, the civilians of Gaza City have been warned to evacuate, been given time and safe passage to go south, to leave Gaza City and head for humanitarian enclave further to the south. But that strike today on the leadership of Hamas in Qatar means that coordination that was led by those senior Hamas figures in Doha, not just for operations on the ground inside of Gaza, and with whatever remaining military leadership of Hamas might yet be there in the tunnels, let's say underneath Gaza City, but also will have an impact on how the negotiations about the hostages go. Now, there are still apparently some 48 hostages. I think, let's see, how is it? 28 of them thought not to be alive anymore, and 20 maybe still alive, we're hoping. I might have those numbers just a little bit off, but about those numbers. But the elimination of this leadership will affect negotiations over those hostages and their fate. The group of senior Hamas leadership figures in Doha that were targeted today by the Israelis were in fact meeting together to discuss the latest negotiations progress and the different communications that had been received from Israel, from the United States, envoys, negotiators, and it was because they were gathered together apparently in a single room, that they were able to be targeted like that. So obviously the future of such negotiations is going to be affected. How? We're not completely sure yet. You asked also, though, about the Abraham Accords. As the Iranian regime's assets, meaning not just its air defenses, radar warning sites, and so forth, but its Islamic jihadi proxy forces, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, are all degraded at a minimum, debilitated, taken down, and now the top leadership of Hamas in Doha, in Qatar, the profile of the Iranian regime in the region is probably at its lowest mark, maybe since the 1979 revolution itself. It's very obvious which is the strong horse in the Middle East. It is not Iran anymore. It is Israel.
So there are Hamas leaders in Turkey as well. What does this mean for them going forward? Are the Israelis going to start a covert war trying to hunt down and take out these leaders?
Well, we know from statements by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Hamas leadership anywhere in the world are targets. Although I don't know that Israel would mount strikes against such figures inside of Turkey, a NATO ally, although Qatar is a non-nuclear ally designated by the United States. But what it does do is puts those remaining Hamas leadership figures who may be in Turkey on notice that were they to travel somewhere else, they may not return home.
Oh, wow.
Or back to Turkey.
When we come back from the break, more with Clare Lopez on the strikes by Israel against Hamas leadership in Qatar.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with our guest today, Clare Lopez, Clare M. Lopez on Twitter, X now. Clare, we've seen a lot of shakeup in the Middle East over the last year. Israel has done things that nobody thought was possible, really eviscerating Hezbollah, taking out Hamas, striking Iran and taking out its nuclear capability. I mean, this is reshaping the Middle East. How is Saudi Arabia and UAE going to react to this? And does this mean an end completely to the Abraham Accords? Or is this really something that they should be cheering behind the scenes, but publicly saying they condemn?
Oh, they're absolutely cheering behind the scenes. There's no question about that. This really gives a boost to the Abraham Accords. Obviously, the Emirates already a formal signatory to the Abraham Accords, along with Bahrain, Morocco, and originally Sudan. With Saudi Arabia understood, the leadership of Saudi Arabia, in particular the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS as he's known, certainly in support, understood to be in support of the Abraham Accords. And really, before the presidency of Joe Biden, in between the two tenures, terms of office of President Trump, it was thought, it was expected, hoped for, that Saudi Arabia would also become a formal signatory to the Abraham Accords. I think now, with the complete takedown, really, of the Iranian regime at its lowest point, weakest point since 1979, I think the Abraham Accords just received quite a bump, quite a mark of encouragement is the way I think they'll see it.
Obviously, the United States is being blamed for this. So what does that mean for potential terror attacks here on U.S. soil in retaliation for the strikes against Hamas and Qatar?
Well, I mean, we've known for a long time that Hezbollah, for example, has had quite an extensive presence inside the United States. We certainly know from public records of various legal cases that have made it to court of their criminal activity here. We also know from reporting as well that Iran has had hit teams inside the United States, literally gunning for President Trump himself and for various members of his previous administration, such as National Security Advisor and UN Ambassador John Bolton, also former Director of CIA and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and others. So we know that the presence of Hezbollah and the Iranians, has been here in the United States. However, at this point of both of those, both Hezbollah and the Iranian regime, in such a weakened state at this point, unless a cell of one or the other of these, decides to go off on their own for some reason, I don't see either the Iranian regime or whatever's left of Hezbollah organizing or ordering some kind of retaliatory strikes inside the United States, much as they might like to. I don't think that they would dare to. President Trump has shown himself to be, if anything, unpredictable as far as they're concerned. And they don't know what's going to happen next. Certainly after Operation Midnight Hammer in June of this year, a couple months ago.
So how about the Muslim Brotherhood? I know there's been a push lately, a renewed push to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization. What does that look like? You think the Muslim Brotherhood would operationalize during this period of time?
No, not at all. The way I should clarify that is to say that, of course, the problem with designating or attempting to designate the Muslim Brotherhood to the foreign terrorist organizations list is that neither the Muslim Brotherhood nor any of its United States front groups has ever committed a single act of terrorism against Americans or the United States. So what do? They do subversion. Now, unfortunately, or maybe just the way it is, there is no U.S. law, Title 18 Criminal Code law, against subversion, mostly protected, I guess, by the First Amendment. There are laws against sedition, seditious conspiracy, of course, treason, but there's no law against subversion. And that's what the Muslim Brotherhood does. They don't do terrorism, and I don't expect them to start. in the United States or against Americans. No. But what they do is far more dangerous to this republic of ours than terrorism, because we know how to deal with terrorism. We go clobber the bad guys. We've clobbered Al-Qaeda. We've clobbered the Taliban. We've clobbered, at the time it was called ISIS. But when it comes to the sophistication of information operations, propaganda that constitutes subversion, we're not very good at that. And I think we need to up our game quite a bit there.
I agree 100%. And that shifts us now to Yemen. We've not talked a lot about Yemen, although Israel tried a decapitation strike there. It was fairly successful, actually. What does this mean for Israel against Yemen? Are they going to continue strikes in Yemen? And it seems like Iran really right now is powerless to stop them.
Well, Iran wouldn't be able to stop Israeli countermeasures against Yemen. But what Iran, the regime, has been doing, of course, is continuing to resupply whatever's left of that Yemeni leadership, supply them with missiles and drones and rockets with which the Houthis, whatever's left of them, continue much more sporadically now, they will notice, but continue to try to launch strikes against Israel, most of which are intercepted long before they even reach Israeli airspace.
What do you think the next 60 days looks like in the Middle East?
That is a $64,000 question. I think that we're going to see the Israeli leadership together with, and I do think in a close relationship alliance with the United States, continue its dominance in the Middle East. And I think that we're going to see the completion of the Gaza operations in coming weeks, maybe a little bit longer, month or two, that will completely finish eliminating whatever Hamas presence is left inside of Gaza, one way or another. Either they are eliminated on the ground and in the tunnels underneath, or they accept to surrender, give up their weapons, go into exile someplace that might accept them. Very hopeful that hostages may be recovered, may be found and rescued. That for Gaza, and then begins in Gaza the great, humongous job of clearing the rubble, rebuilding all of that President Trump has had in mind as a developer, as one who looks at real estate like that of Gaza on the shores of the Mediterranean. But that will take a long time. So that's Gaza. I think in the rest of the Middle East, I think, going back to the question before, I think there is a good likelihood that Saudi Arabia may indeed eventually join as a formal signatory to the Abraham Accords. Maybe others, including other Gulf states there in the region. We'll have to see about that. But Iran is a big focus for me, as you probably know, and there, the people have had it. I just participated 2 days ago, in a formal program in downtown Washington, D.C. to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the founding of the Iranian opposition group, the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, PMOI. And they are the leadership of the resistance forces on the ground inside of Iran, where the people, as I said, have had it. It's been a brutally hot summer, as it often is in those regions, but the electricity supply has been sporadic, cut off, blackouts, brownouts, and even worse, Iran is running out of water, literally running out of water. The riverbeds are dirt dry. The lake beds are dry. Even Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel got on a video and talked directly to the Iranian people, offering them the technology that Israel, also an arid place, the technology that they have developed to deal with that kind of a climate, including desalinization of salt water, like from the Mediterranean, including the recycling of wastewater. Israel recycles over 90% of all its wastewater. Benjamin Netanyahu offered that technology to the people of Iran. Obviously, the regime leadership doesn't want any part of it, but those deprivations of electricity, of water, are serious, in addition to the horrific execution campaign of this murderous regime inside of Iran against its own people. That is reaching a culmination. I think it's reaching a breaking point. We are expecting to see Iranian President Pezeshkian at the United Nations later this month, September 2025, where he is expected to speak at the United Nations, and a number of us from and with supporting, standing by the Iranian opposition will be in New York to rally against him, his presence in New York City, his murderous regime. And I expect that there, in particular, we're going to see changes over the coming weeks and months this year.
What a time to be alive. Clare Lopez, thank you once again for being here on Patriot Radio. Absolutely amazing interview. Blessings to you and keep up the fight.
Thank you very much.
Clare M. Lopez on X. And what you can do, pray for the safety of the hostages right now. In fact, we lift them up to you, Father, and we just pray for their safety in Jesus' name. And we just pray for their safe return and their release in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Wow. A lot happening in the Middle East. We're going to keep our eye on it, and so should you. Follow us on Telegram, patriotradio.us. And thank you for joining me today. This is Matt Shea. May God bless all of you. The awakening is here, so keep up the fight.